So that was pretty fast. I mean, it's only been what, a week since the RTX 4070 launched, and they are already talking about the price being discounted. That's what happens when people don't buy. Once in a while, I'll get a comment where people are like, just because a GPU that launched is in stock, it doesn't mean it's a failed launch. Well, I disagree because even going back to like the 20 series, initially anything good would sell out almost immediately. We don't even have to talk about sort of the, the crypto mining craze and the great GPU shortage. You can talk about during normal times, and it's really normal to see GPUs sell out. And it's not like we're seeing some GPUs on the shelves. 4070s are abundant everywhere. Not even my favorite Micro Center, where I understand people don't have it everywhere, but you don't even need it this time. They were also shipping out across the country. And if you even have a Best Buy near you, Best Buy has them in stock, Newegg, Amazon, you name it. And in other places in the world as well, the 4070 has been in stock. And because of this, we can see that the launch isn't just like, okay, it seems like really, really bad. Like nobody's buying. Some users even posted on some of the videos that I made on the 4070. For example, one guy said that at his local Micro Center, that where he actually works, they set up this whole table for the 4070. They were all excited since it's a GPU launch, and they thought a lot of people would come in, and they had literally like one person come in and buy a GPU. It's funny because I've actually seen this happen multiple times recently with stuff like the Ryzen launch. When the 7950X came out, like nobody bought it. I think day one, the local store that I go to sold like 5 or 6 copies. That was sort of the beginning where we saw these, computer parts and everything are down. But really shocking to see that, because if we go back just like a year or two, anything that would come out would sell out right away. So what does this mean, and what exactly is going on? It looks like the 4070 is going to get potentially a discount of $50, maybe by the way of Nvidia giving rebates to its board partners. So it's not like an MSRP cut or something that's definitely going to happen, but because there are already inklings of this, I think there's a really good chance it's going to happen. Maybe the board partners, if they're selling enough of them, they may choose to just pocket that extra money and put it towards the GPUs that they are selling. Because remember, GPUs do have very, very thin margins. If anything, look at what happened to EVGA. Do you think if they were making like millions and millions of dollars in profit, even with some headache with Nvidia, they would have quit? I don't think so. It probably meant that their margins were not only really tight, the business just wasn't worth it for them. So we can look at the other AIB companies. Remember, most of these companies are actually like pretty big, like Asus, MSI, even Gigabyte. They have various products, not just GPUs. They make monitors and laptops and all sorts of technology things, routers. So if their GPU division barely makes money or just a little bit, maybe for them it's worth it. But like EVGA doesn't make laptops. They don't make anything else really aside from a few power supplies and maybe some peripherals. So you can see that the GPU business was really the main thing that they had going for them. So any difference, like $50 extra that Nvidia may give as like a rebate to its partners, could certainly make a difference. Even if they don't pocket it, if they pass that on along to the consumer, let's say if we start seeing these GPUs at around $549, that just means that more of them will sell. This isn't only the 4070 that we're seeing. Perhaps the 4080 and the 4090 are also going to get this like $50 price cut. Some people have said they've even seen the 4080 under MSRP along with the 4090, which is a much more expensive GPU, but somehow it's more desirable, and because of its performance, it really stayed higher for much, much longer. So while YouTubers will always tell you, oh, maybe wait before buying a GPU, in this case, it may actually pay off if you wait a little bit more. It's possible very soon, if you're already hearing news about this during the first week, maybe within the next few weeks, we may start to see these 4070s discounted. I mean, there's a lot of precedent for this. Even the 4070 Ti, many of those models got discounted. Many of the more expensive 4080s got discounted. Remember, even AMD, the 7900 XT, which didn't sell that well either, those were also discounted, fairly early on into their life cycle with an economy that's a a little bit unpredictable, along with like just PC sales not doing very well, along with really high pricing to begin with, something very possible that may happen. Look at even like the Ryzen CPUs. When they came out at an expensive MSRP, I remember the Ryzen, 7950X and those, within the first week, Micro Center was already giving away free RAM and discounting them by a significant amount. So these things happen pretty quickly. So then we start to focus back on the RTX 4070. Let's say if it is $549, here are really two important things we have to think about. First, is it worth it then at that price? Is it a really good recommendation? And two, what does that mean for the 4060 Ti? These two questions for anybody shopping within this price range under $600 is going to be really, really essential. Let's answer the first one. Is it going to be worth it at $549? At $599, you can see most reviews were kind of like in the middle. Most people weren't really recommending it, but they weren't saying it's terrible either. It does have a few positives. It's very power efficient, around 200 watts, significantly less power than like a 320 watt 3080. And the performance, aside from the VRAM limitations, it's kind of on par with it in many, many games. Sometimes the 3080 does win. Sometimes the 4070 wins, especially if you use something like DLSS 3, which is going to be a main crux of the argument. If DLSS 3 is important to you and the games you play support it, then you will see pretty good performance in those games. And generally, they're single player AAA titles. The latency is not going to be that big of an issue, and then you will be getting a lot better performance than anything available from last generation. And it is the cheapest GPU at its current price of $599 that does offer DLSS 3. So those questions at $599, certainly valid. It was sort of like shaky. People weren't recommending it that strongly. Like, for example, the 4090, even though it was, $1599, people basically said, if you have the money, just buy it. It's the best GPU. It's pretty simple. Everything else was cloudy. The 4080 and 4070 Ti really were more on the negative side, people saying not to buy it because of their obvious way too high pricing. So the 4070 at $549, I think then it just goes beyond that line where you can say this is something that's, recommendable. If that's in your price range, probably better to buy this than almost anything else out there. Then at $549, it's a little bit more reasonable. It's not quite $599, so you're not really dealing with the shortcomings with the VRAM nearly as much. They're much easier to stomach. And at that price, considering it's going to be the cheapest next generation GPU you can get, period, from Nvidia as well as AMD, I think it's going to be a pretty solid contender. The only thing that would throw a wrench in the mix of recommending a 4070 at $549 would be if AMD responds with like a 7800 XT. Maybe it would be $600, but maybe it would have, 16 gigabytes of VRAM. That's going to be a big distinction. We've seen recently some GPUs like the 6800 XT, because they have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, they've aged pretty well compared to like 3070s and 3070 Ti. So that could be definitely a determining factor, and especially if it has good rasterization performance, AMD could have really a killer product on their hand if they have 16 gigabytes of VRAM and if they keep the pricing fair. If they price that puppy at $699, I don't think it's going to sell. People are just going to go to a much cheaper 4070. Remember, Nvidia has the power to lower prices. I know we typically see them go up, but they've lowered prices before when it suits them, especially to detract the competition. So they'll lower that 4070 down enough that people are not even going to think about AMD. AMD has to, proactively counterbalance that by starting with a price that people can't ignore. Imagine $550 for a 7800 XT. I mean, that wouldn't happen, but that would pretty much be the GPU that everybody buys. At $650, I think that's probably the price they'll price it at. It's going to be considerably under the 7900 XT, and $650 is the price of the 6800 XT. So it definitely has that precedent. And then it's going to be maybe a little bit more than a 4070, but then it will perform better on average, aside from ray tracing and DLSS 3, than a 4070. Aside from AMD introducing some competition, I think at $549, the 4070 will then make a fairly compelling case for a next generation GPU, and it's really not that bad. I even threw it on Cyberpunk and put overdrive at 4K, I was completely expecting the GPU to just, buckle down and die, but it was playable. It wasn't too bad. And those are, specs that you normally would never put in a 4070. And of course, that was with DLSS 3. If you just do, regular without any type of upscaling, just like a 4090 gets like 20 frames per second in Cyberpunk, you're going to get like 7 or 8 frames per second. It's going to be unplayable. But with DLSS 3, you can kind of play it. And obviously, if you set it down to 1440p and you put in some more reasonable settings, like maybe even ray tracing medium or ultra, it will kind of do the job in those games. So that's pretty impressive with the DLSS 3, especially considering it's only sipping like 200 watts of power. At 549, that's a GPU that I think more and more people will recommend. And honestly, it may be one of the GPUs that even I think is a decent buy in a very long time. But at 549, and if that 549 model is pretty good, that's another issue. $599 for the Founders Edition, which likely will never change its price, is definitely probably one of the best, 4070s you can get, because the entire presentation is insane. Like, the box is amazing, but forget that. Forget the packaging. The GPU itself has one of the best PCBs, and also the build quality is exceptional on the Founders Edition. Nvidia obviously does not care about losing money on packaging and on the presentation of the GPU, or they have a lot more headroom than the AIB partners, which typically will have just a lot cheaper, GPU designs and things like that. But 549, if it's a nice GPU and it's not underpowered compared to the Founders Edition, and if it doesn't perform thermally poor, could be a pretty good buy. Some will be kind of crap at 549, as not all 4070s are the same. So we have to see exactly which ones may potentially get discounted. And I want to say, the discount isn't necessarily coming yet. We don't know when. It may not even happen, and it could be just maybe a $10 discount or $20. We're just guessing here. It might be $50 that goes down, because that would make a lot of sense, and that's sort of what the leaked rumors say that the rebate might be from Nvidia. So yet to see, but that would definitely change things a little bit. And while we would love to see it at $499, then it would be like a slam dunk recommendation. 4070 would be a great value at $499. 549 may be maybe a compromise between really high GPU prices and gamers being happy. So keep waiting a little bit longer, and I think these prices may eventually get back to where you're going to be much more satisfied buying one of these GPUs. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.